Martell Holt just gave us a season finale nobody really expected, but somehow everyone secretly wanted to see. So let's talk about it. What happens when the man who once called himself the king of real estate, the guy who used to walk across our screens like he owned everything in sight, suddenly ends up with nothing but a mugshot, a no-contact order, and a fanbase that's completely disappointed? What happens when that so-called power couple turns into a courtroom battle, where the only thing left to divide is custody schedules, legal bills, and whatever is left of their reputation? And to make things even heavier, the judge is clearly not playing around this time. This isn't just reality TV drama anymore. This feels more like a real-life legal disaster unfolding in front of everyone. And in the middle of it all, Melody Sherry walks out looking calm, collected, and like she just won the final round of a long, exhausting fight. So yes, grab your popcorn, because this story gets messy fast. Martell Holt once lived like he was on top of the world. He was the polished businessman on TV, always dressed sharp, always smiling beside Melody Sherry, giving the image of success, love, and control. But behind all those perfect photos and TV moments, things were not as smooth as they looked. Slowly, the image started to fall apart. This was the same man fans once called a symbol of success, running a real estate business, raising a family, and starring in a popular show about love and ambition. But instead of protecting what he had, he made choices that started destroying it. Rumors of cheating turned into public scandals. Private drama became online headlines. And every time he tried to talk his way out of it, things only got worse. Then came a major turning point in May 2024, when a court convicted him of domestic violence and harassment. Instead of accepting it, he appealed the decision, hoping for a different outcome. But the second court didn't change the result. The conviction stood. And that changed everything. Because now another big case was coming, this time about custody of the children. And all those past issues started stacking up against him. Meanwhile, Melody stayed focused. She didn't waste energy on chaos. She focused on her children, her work, and rebuilding her life step by step. While Martell's image was falling apart, she was growing stronger. As time passed, even his supporters started changing their minds. People online grew tired of the excuses. The comment sections turned against him. And what was once debate turned into criticism. His attempts to defend himself online didn't help either. Instead of sounding convincing, they started sounding desperate. Court records told a very different story than what he was saying publicly. They showed repeated issues, legal trouble, and growing instability. By 2025, the situation had escalated even more. A custody hearing was scheduled, and everything was about to come out in court. When the hearing finally happened, it drew huge attention. It felt like the whole city was watching. Evidence presented in court included arguments, financial issues, and messages that painted a very negative picture. Former employees, caregivers, and others also testified about troubling behavior and tense situations. Some of the most shocking moments came from audio recordings where Martell could be heard yelling and losing control. The courtroom reacted strongly to this evidence. At the same time, Melody gave her testimony calmly. She explained how she balanced raising children, working, and dealing with ongoing stress, all while trying to keep life stable for her family. That contrast made a big impact in court. Soon after, the judge made the final decision. Melody Sherry was granted primary custody of the children. Martell was given limited, supervised visitation and ordered to attend anger management and financial responsibility programs. 0. The reaction was immediate. Online, people exploded with opinions. Many supported Melody, calling her strong and resilient. Others criticized Martell and pointed to his past actions as the reason for the outcome. Martell later went on social media trying to defend himself and claim the system was unfair. But by this point, most people were no longer convinced. Reports also began circulating that his business relationships were falling apart, with partners stepping away and opportunities disappearing. Meanwhile, Melody moved forward. She signed new deals, focused on her music and business ventures, and continued building her brand. Public support for her grew even stronger. What used to be a shared TV story has now turned into a clear split. One person rebuilding, the others struggling to hold things together. And now the bigger question is, what does this say about the stories we once believed on TV? How often do we mistake image for reality? Because in the end, this wasn't just a custody case. It became a lesson about choices, consequences, and how quickly public image can collapse when reality catches up. The story might not be fully over yet, but one thing is clear, the version of Martell Holt we once saw on screen is not the same one standing in court today. And as the dust begins to settle, the aftermath feels heavier than the verdict itself. Because once the courtroom doors closed, reality didn't stop, it actually got louder. For Martell, life outside the courtroom started shifting fast. The same doors that once opened easily for business deals, interviews, and appearances began closing one by one. Opportunities that used to come through his name started slowing down, and people who once stood beside him quietly stepped back. In the world of public image and business, reputation is everything. And once trust starts breaking, it doesn't come back overnight. He tried to maintain a strong front, still posting, still speaking out, still insisting that things weren't being portrayed fairly. But the energy around him had changed. The audience wasn't arguing anymore. They were watching from a distance. Meanwhile, Melody's life looked completely different. Instead of being pulled into constant conflict, she leaned further into peace and progress. Her focus stayed on her children, her work, and building something stable for the future. Every move she made seemed intentional, like she had finally stepped out of survival mode and into growth. People who once doubted her started acknowledging her strength. Not because she said anything new, but because her actions spoke louder than any headline. The contrast between both of their paths became impossible to ignore. One side was dealing with consequences, legal limitations, and public criticism. The other was building, expanding, and moving forward with support and momentum. And that's what made this situation stick in people's minds. It wasn't just about drama anymore. It became a clear example of how differently life can turn out when choices finally catch up. Online discussions kept going, of course. Some people still debated, some defended, some criticized. But the overall tone had shifted. The story was no longer about who said what, but about what actually happened. And in cases like this, public opinion tends to settle over time. As for Martell, the road ahead looks uncertain. Rebuilding trust, both personally and professionally, is never easy, especially when everything has played out so publicly. It's a long process, and there are no shortcuts. For Melody, this moment feels like a turning point. Not the end of a chapter, but the beginning of a different one where she's no longer defined by conflict, but by direction. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. Sometimes the loudest stories aren't about who wins or loses in court, but about who manages to rebuild after everything falls apart. Because in the end, fame fades, headlines move on, and drama gets replaced by new stories. But the impact of choices, that stays. As time moves forward, the story keeps fading from courtroom headlines into something more permanent, consequences becoming reality, not just gossip. For Martell, that means facing the quieter side of fallout, the part that doesn't trend online but still changes everything. Less attention, fewer invitations, and a constant pressure to rebuild a name that used to open doors instantly. Even simple things like partnerships, media features, and business trust now require more effort than before. And that's often the hardest shift, not the public criticism, but the silence that comes after it. He's left in a position where every move matters more than ever. Any attempt to rebuild his image has to compete with a long record of public drama and court decisions that people haven't forgotten. Whether he accepts it or fights against it, the reality is the same. Starting over is no longer optional, it's necessary. Meanwhile, Melody continues moving in a different direction entirely. Instead of being pulled back into conflict, she's focused on expansion. Her energy is going into stability, business growth, and creating a stronger foundation for her children. The difference now is that she's no longer reacting to chaos, she's operating beyond it. That shift changes everything. Because when someone is no longer stuck in survival mode, their entire future opens up differently. decisions become clearer, opportunities feel more aligned, and life starts to feel like it's being built, not repaired. Public perception has also settled into a clearer picture. What once felt like a back-and-forth debate has turned into acceptance of where things stand now. People move on, conversations change, and attention shifts elsewhere, but the outcome remains. And that's what makes stories like this linger in people's minds. Not because of the drama itself, but because of what it reveals underneath it all. Power, image, and success can look solid from the outside, but they're fragile when not backed by accountability and consistency. Once that cracks, everything built on top of it starts to shift too. At this point, both lives are moving in completely different directions. One is focused on rebuilding from the ground up, step by step, with uncertainty still ahead. The other is focused on growth, stability, and moving forward without looking back. And while the public will eventually shift to the next story, this one leaves a lasting reminder. In reality TV, people often watch for entertainment, but real life doesn't reset after the final episode. It keeps going. And every decision writes the next season. And as the weeks turn into months, the noise around the case starts to fade, but the impact doesn't. For Martell, this stage becomes less about headlines and more about adjustment. Life isn't scripted anymore, and there's no production team smoothing out the rough edges. Every day requires rebuilding trust in small, often invisible ways. Conversations that used to be easy now feel careful. Relationships that once came with ease now require proof of